on a couple of Trek sims and play in a few places. And what we're going to do today is look at a couple of maps that I've made before. We're going to talk about what maps can bring to your game, maybe give a couple of examples. And we're actually going to make one, just the bare bones of one. We're actually going to start, as I mentioned, I am EXO on a newly launched sim in Theta fleet called USS Yorktown. And it will explore a completely new region of space. So we're going to actually make kind of the start of that map with me showing you a few of the techniques that I use. Starting here, this program here is the GNU image manipulation program, GIMP. It is free. It is, I guess, an open source version of Photoshop or similar. It works with similar file types. Another one that you can use is paint.net. I also see people using Photoshop or Illustrator. The one that I use here is GIMP. Like I said, it's free. Download it, and you're able to do similar. Now, I'm going to switch here to a map that I've made of essentially not all of Federation space, but a good amount of Federation space. You can see it's very busy. But this is what a map can look like if you're extremely busy and extremely bored one day, or over the course of, this took weeks, obviously. But this is the sort of thing that I have fun making. You look around, you've got, I shall zoom out here. The setting of this map is actually 2399, immediately before the events of Picard Season 1. And a couple things I want to highlight is that it is consistent with Picard up to Season 1, and also some things like Trek video games, which I'm a particularly big fan of. If we go over here, you might recognize various star systems from the video game Bridge Commander. The Vesuvi incident, where that star went supernova, was the thing which kicked off that game. Over on this side, oops, sorry. Beta Regula, Regula Badlands, Suadron. These are places from the game Armada 2. Phrygius is from one of these 1990s Star Trek The Next Generation games. I think the Final Unity. So, this is one example. And I'll just mention real quick, I based this heavily on pre-existing maps, but then made a lot of changes. But this is one kind of example. This one here is a Voyager Season 1 plus some more content. That it is very incomplete, as you can see. It's smaller, less dense. I don't have a lot of flair in the top left or bottom right yet. It is consistent with Voyager Season 1 and up to maybe the first quarter or so of Season 2, and includes some completely kind of headcanon, I guess is the right word, but canon to the story I'm trying to tell, original creations. This Arai Empire here off to the right is an entirely new antagonist for the story that I'm trying to tell in where this map is going to be used. But you can see we have Okampa, the nucleogenic cloud being, where there was coffee inside, the Harry Kim wormhole, Hakonian space, Talax. This actually corrects a mistake that was made in the Star Trek Star Charts book, which put Talax up here in the top corner, forgetting the fact that Voyager actually visited it near the end. Crowtonan Guard was referenced in Equinox, so you can imagine that when Voyager left and went one way, the Equinox went the other way and came across these people. The third map I'm going to show here is, this is the map I made for another sim where I am the XO. It's the USS Chimera, a part of Pegasus Fleet. And I went a different direction with this, and this is a similar direction that we're going to take with the other map that we're going to be making originally. Now, one thing you'll notice is what I'll call fog of war, covering most of it. The sim USS Chimera is a exploring new space sort of sim, and so there's a lot yet to see. By my logic, we should know where all of the stars are. So I have empty dots showing where everything is. But also we have a few places that we visited. In fact, the current mission that's being written, there's two. There is one mission taking place inside this nebula, and a side quest taking place on some ruins in an abandoned desert planet. So I have both of these here. Previous stories have taken place here, and you can see a starbase, a Federation starbase. That is where the story started, and then we started branching off. Now, when I've talked about maps in the briefing of my panel, what my panel is all about, talk about why maps are cool. And of course, let's not kid ourselves. Maps are cool. It's cool to look at a map to see where things are. Surely I'm not the only person who's opened a book of sci-fi or high fantasy and spend a long time, probably too much time, looking at that map of the world or the map of the setting. Does anyone else perhaps recall from 1999 through the early 2000s the Star Wars and New Jedi Order books, which every single one contained a map at the start showing exactly how far the Yuuzhan Vong invasion had come, and you could look and see where your various characters are relative to each other. And what places that have been named in other books or in movies are under threat next. And that's one of the benefits. If you are setting your mission on, pick a random one, Nelvana, well, what does that tell you? Nelvana is reasonably close to a Federation starbase. It's very close to the Romulan border. If you're familiar with some other places, you might know that there's trade with Argalius. This was the wolf in the fold planet of hedonism. It's also close to Vashti, which has lots of Romulan refugees from Picard Season 1. You can make educated guesses about what the political dynamics, what the relationships, what the demographics of the people might be from looking at what is near and what is far. You're probably not going to face too much in the way of a threatening Klingon marauder that's going to come and steal things. The Klingons, all the way over here. You might also get some historical context. In the setting where this map is set, this is a little bit inspired from Star Trek Online. You see here 3 planets called Garag, Rog, and Koreb. Yeah, you might think that these are Klingon planets, but I've actually drawn those from Gorn names, and they tell that there is, in my story, an ongoing conflict between the Gorn and the Klingons. I'm kind of modeling it a little bit after Russia and Ukraine right now, but it's actually something of a smaller side of things. It's not the main focus of the story, but it's probably going to come up at some point. But you can tell when you see, let's say there's a name that you recognize as definitely being Klingon, but colored green, well, that's telling you something about your story, about your setting, that you can communicate with others. Let's just scroll around here for a minute, see if there's anything else. I'm pointing out over here this stretch. Also, I should ask, can you see my cursor if I'm circling something? Excellent. You can see me wildly moving around my cursor. While I'm in the chat, I'm actually going to mention, do you include any sort of scale? That is a fantastic question that I was going to get to at some point, but I'm going to actually interrupt myself now with it. I choose not to include scale, and this is a tip that I have. If there's one thing I consider Star Trek being, is that it is wildly inconsistent with things like distance. An example might be in the pilot episode of Enterprise, it took the Enterprise 4 days, and this is in the dialogue, 4 days to get to Kronos, and at warp 4 or 4.5. So that's telling that, and we know that these things are not, we know that that's not realistic because, the Klingons would absolutely destroy Earth within a fairly short amount of time once an actual war started, like the war in Discovery or other conflicts, if Earth was that close to Kronos. So I decide, people have been saying in the chat, Alex said very well, canon should never get in the way of a good story. Dulac says, all hail speed of plot. I absolutely agree. What you should be thinking of is distance relative to each other. I just randomly picked several planets that were all equidistant apart. Mazar is close to Evora. It's further from Corridon. That means that something about how fast a ship going from one to the other will take. So that's my logic. I've included lines in this particular map. I'm actually not going to cover how to make those in GIMP because I've not perfected it and I don't really like how I've done this. So I'm not going to advocate for it just yet. This is mostly for tracking for my own purposes. I can tell you, if you look at a map that is this big and this busy, I sometimes forget where things are. So I actually have a spreadsheet that shows every single planet or every single system that's in here, what interesting landmarks might be there, and where I can find it. So I know that Pacifica is in M2. And if I'm ever looking, oh no, I've forgotten where Pacifica is. Oh, it's in M2. Great. But I was flagging this circle over here. This is a bit of a reference to the early conquests of the Klingons at midway through Deep Space Nine, where they invaded Cardassian space in Way of the Warrior. But something that's actually useful to know, and I've read some of the kind of background text that's been made about this, the Treaty of Bajor, which ended the Dominion War, reset the borders to where they were after the Klingons stopped their invasion, not before they started their invasion. So Klingon holdings in this part of the map should remain. And I went with the interpretation of the Star Trek Star Charts map that kept some amount of distance between Klingon and Cardassian space, that Klingon fleet, because they're allied with the Federation, it didn't matter that they transited through Federation space, stopped at Bajor, did some invasions. Obviously, if they launched from Bajor, then they would have mostly taken planets nearest to Bajor, but I've decided they actually took systems over here. And the named systems are mostly from Armada 2. If you've played the video game Armada 2, you'll know that the entire Klingon campaign had to do with a renegade Cardassian who was trying to make Cardassia great again, for lack of a better term, and got utterly destroyed by Martok. So I had a few named systems that I decided to throw in some Klingon territory over here. Switching back real quick to the chat. Yeah, play fast and loose with distance. Yeah, the note about Romulans mentioned, yes, there's no map I've ever seen that has Cardassian space anywhere near Romulan space, but Jem'Hadar regularly cut through the neutral zone to attack Federation targets in the Pale Moonlight. One of, if not the best episode ever made. Wildly inconsistent mapping. So we have fun. And this is actually going to be my second tip. My first tip was distance, scale distance doesn't matter. Second tip, have fun with it. Put what you want. Video game fans might recall the Hydrons from Starfleet Command 1 and 2. That's in here. The Kzinti are in here, and includes Lyra. The Lyrans were the cat aliens from Starfleet Command 1 and 2. I've got the Talarians. I've got the Sheliak. The Tamarian homeworld is down over here. I planned at some point to put the Kinshaya from the books somewhere in this bottom corner. I've not done that yet. But yeah, have fun with it. Now we're going to go on to the main star of our day here, and that's going to be, we're going to make ourselves a little map together. I've got some handwritten notes here, and I'm going to make one. So we're going to start with new. The size. I like to start with a 2000 by 2000 pixel map. You can always make this bigger. Doesn't have to be, or you can always make it smaller too. But pick something arbitrary, pick something that's big enough though. I will tell you, your file will be large. This map measures in the gigabytes. Now, it has a background. That background is black. Makes sense. Figure you don't really need anything transparent or anything too colorful. If anyone here is a fan of the Dawn of Victory world building that's being done on the YouTube channel Templin Institute, they have some beautiful nebula art. That is another way to go. I personally find that a bit busy. I want my map, I feel like my map is going to be busy enough with territory lines, and my map will have territory lines. So I prefer leaving it somewhat blank. But it does need a little bit of character. So I'm going to actually dot this with some stars. But I'm going to be a bit cheap about this. I'm going to use the technique that you can see in this map here. If you zoom in, these stars are actually just very simple dots. So we're going to make a new layer. Layers are your friend. Starfield 1. Going to be the title of this layer. This layer fills the entire screen, the entire canvas. And we're going to select our brush, and we are going to use a paintbrush, which is the one that is currently selected. Yes, paintbrush. I have some little notes here for myself. The size of it is going to be 9 pixels, and the opacity is going to be 80-ish. And we're going to make some dots. Did that work? I'm actually not entirely satisfied with that, but we're going to start with there. Dots. Be random. Stars are random. They come out a bit janky. Like that one, you see I accidentally did two too close to each other. Just undo, redo, it's fine. Next we're actually gonna do this in a couple of tiers. Next one is going to be 6 points at 60% opacity. Smaller stars, more distant stars. This isn't actually meant to show where anything is. This is just a bit of flavor for the map. And then lastly, 4 pixels and 45%. And I'm going to give you tip number 3. Mess around. Have fun. Just, if you look at something and you think it doesn't look good, try something different. Mess with the settings. I wrote these down from playing around with it. It's like if you ever ask your grandmother for a recipe, it probably doesn't have specific measurements because it's done by feeling. And it takes a moment to actually plan it out and see exactly what she meant by a little bit of cayenne. I'm cutting back for the chat for a second, and I see a very interesting point that I want to mention. Max Culver mentions Sector 221G Thelonian space. The story that I'm making this for the USS Yorktown is something that is a little bit based on the experience in Thelonian space in Star Trek New Frontier. It's an original setting. The person running the story, it is, say this is a Theta Fleet sim, the GM is the user Ahoy there, if you've come across him. He's trying to base it a little bit on the Romanian, the collapse of Romania after the Ceausescu era. So, but it's very much getting some inspirations from the idea of Thelonian space, a sector that is completely or barely visited by the Federation, but is known, it's out there, it's a bit isolationist. GDM Boy says, yeah, always a problem for Nova uploads. To be clear, when I say gigabyte size, I actually am meaning this is a .xcf file. That's the size of that. Once you flatten it and put it into a PNG, and you can scale it down, you should get to some much more reasonable sizes. Probably nothing that you can use the upload in Nova, but if you have access to your own FTP, you can throw the PNGs in there, and that'll work just fine. Alex mentioning binary systems when I accidentally drag the dots. Yes, correct. That's what I meant to do. Now I want to actually put some things, though, that are a bit more interesting, useful, story focused. And that is going to be our actual like place names, places that are like our systems of interest. Now, you can see on this map, every single system of interest has an icon. This icon has red with a white circle around it and a nice label. I've chosen this because it appears fairly visible no matter the color I choose. The white stands out against red. The red stands out. The white label is what I'm probably going to use as well. I might change my mind once I see the choice of territory color that I use. Now, to make one of these dots, first of all, we make a new layer. Always make a new layer. System template. This new layer is on top, and I'm going to switch to a pencil. Important difference between a pencil and a paintbrush marker is that the pencil is solid all the way around. You can see that there's some fading around the outsides. Here there is not. Now I'm going to make my first marker be 19 pixels in white. The second one is going to be 15 pixels. Pardon me a second, I need to cough. I really hope my mute just worked just then. There we go. 2 easy clicks and we have a marker that shows us a landmark of interest. Now, something I'm going to do to make this a little easier to manage is right now our layer is the entire size of our map, 2000 by 2000 pixels. It does not need to be any wider, though, than this. And we can move it around as we like. And most importantly, we can duplicate it a whole bunch. And we start putting them however we want. I'm not going to make all of them right now, and I'm actually not making this permanent right now. This is just somewhat arbitrary. But right now we've just made, let's see, that's 11 systems with 11 quick clicks. I'm actually going to put a few of these on top of the largest dots. And I'll have a couple that are clustered a bit more together. A couple that are a little further away. You want it to look random, but it could have a little bit of flavor. A nice little 3-part system over here. 3 systems that are closely related. We're going to be doing a lot more. Right now you can see they're all just labeled system template copy. We're going to rename all of these. And in fact, what I'd like from you as we're working here is, if you want, I'd be actually really welcome some original star system names so we can start putting some in. This particular state that we're working with does have a name that has been established. This is the provisional state of Greater Annexar, formerly known as the Annexari Socialist Republic, which a few months prior, or for the previous few years, had been in a rather intense civil war, and very recently the state collapsed and is now undergoing reforms and requires the aid of the Federation and the aforementioned titular USS Yorktown. I have a few systems where the GM has asked me for the name. An important tip that I have is to label the stars here. One of my original instructions that I got when learning how to make a map was put your dots and that your dots were going to be your stars. And that was useful to a point, but then I forgot which each star was meant to be. But now I know that even without labels, if I'm working within GIMP, this one here is Timisoara, and this one here is Anaxar. Now we're going to make labels. What did I refer to labels as? Checking my notes real quick. So we are going to use white text. Maybe a little bit off-white, but I can change that later. We're going to size this up. It's going to be a 20-point font. The default is fine. And we're going to spell it out. And then I'm going to do a quick click there on the corner. And now my entire text layer is exactly the size of the text. And I can move it around. And I can put the label underneath the system. And I always like to associate the label here with the star. I need to make another label. This button down here is to duplicate a layer. Duplicate it. Drag the top one out, which is the copy. Click on my text tool. Edit the text. This is Timisoara. Which one is Timisoara? This guy right here. There you go. Here's good ways to make something that looks, I like to think, pretty, if not pretty, functional. Checking back here, we have the first hint, or the first name option. Esro Maria, I like that. A few bits. I mentioned I should actually gesture to some of the things that some of the buttons I've been clicking, I suppose. Down here in the bottom corner, this is where everything to do with layers is. So if I want to duplicate a layer, you can see there's a button right here. Create a duplicate of the layer and add it to the images. You always want to work when doing this with different layers because, as I said, you can move them independently from each other. Yes, throw one down here. One over here. Great. This is actually going to have something like 35 maps or 35 systems by the time I'm done, but which we won't get to today probably. Perhaps, though, you also want to denote things that aren't star systems. I've got a couple of examples in my main map over here. We're going to start with Starbase. I've chosen the arbitrary shape of a triangle. Triangles are a little bit trickier to make, but let's just make one again. I've made a new layer from the button down here. Create a new layer. We're going to go back to the pencil. I'm going to make a fairly small all brush, and I'm actually going to count out. Oops. It's very easy to misclick in this, but we're going to just make something fairly straightforward. 3, 4, 5, 1. There we go. And let's make this into a neat little triangle. And then maybe change the color. I used blue in my last one. Blue seems nice. Make it a little smaller. Will it be perfect? No. Does it need to be perfect? No. You can always adjust. You know, that looks all right. And now we have Starbase template. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before with layer, crop to content. I don't like that shade of blue I've picked. I feel like it's too bright. So, darken it a little bit. Let's try this one. Like in Paint, you have a simple bucket fill. That looks all right. Let's see how it looks against a star. Oh, that's actually way too big. But we can scale. This function here, this actually is lots of different tools. If you right-click, you open up a whole bunch of different options. Flip, rotate, but we're going to use scale. Click on our layer, and we're going to shrink it down. Still looks good. Click on the scale button to finalize it. Well, that doesn't look great, actually. Pardon me 2 seconds. Quick cough, quick sip of tea. I don't like that it's a bit choppy like this, but for now, you definitely get the idea that this is... I'm actually going to shrink it a little more. You can get you know that this is a landmark, like a starbase, in the same system as this star here. And then you can make a new label for it too. I'm going to use a bright blue label. Oops, wrong button here. I'm going to use an obnoxiously blue label for this guy. I'm going to make it smaller than the other ones. Last one was 20. I'm going to make this, let's say 12. And this is going to be Starbase 57. Sure, we'll rename it later. Grow this so that it's big enough here. Shrink that. And, oops. Can we zoom out a bit? This system now has Starbase 57 in orbit. You can make all sorts of shapes. You'll see over in this one, did I actually, oh, I didn't finish it yet. Okay. You can see here, I inverted the triangle and I put a purple color to indicate a wormhole. And I want to see, did I end up putting in this map? I legitimately don't remember. I was in the process at one point of making a hexagon that was supposed to be an artificial transwarp gate. But I don't think I actually put it anywhere. But anyway, it's my point being shapes. You learned them in school, you know them all. Make an interesting shape. Have it denote something. If you want a little legend in the corner, blue triangle equals space station, red circle equals star system, inhabited star system, or otherwise named star system, you're welcome to do that. GDM Boy says, I find it's very easy to misclick with any given art program. I agree. I'm heavily relying on my left hand typing Control Z and undoing things. One thing this map will have is... Oh, and I also want to mention layers, as I always talk about layers. The layer, which layer is on top denotes which one will take precedence if they are stacked. So, the label for Annexar is underneath the layer of... the layer for the label Annexar is underneath the layer of the star Annexar. So if I were to move the layer, it will slide underneath. This is useful for cases where I do need to stack things, which is going to be our next thing. Because we're going to actually draw out the territory of the former Annexari Socialist Republic, now called Provisional State of Greater Annexar. And we're going to do that with, guess what? A new layer. Territory. And we are going to get pencil for now, yes. We're going to need a decent-sized brush, I think. And you might have a very clear idea of what you want this to look like. Or you might freestyle it a little bit. In this map here, I actually had, when I made this one, a different map that someone else had made underneath it as a layer. And I traced a little bit so I could get some of the main focus areas. I knew already that this was the rough shape of the Romulan Empire. Quite a few maps of this being a rough shape of the Cardassian Union. they often show Tholian or Breen space as being kind of a bit janky like this, with spires that reach out. Perhaps there's an individual station or inhabited system that we just don't know about that's at the end of these. So if you have something that you want to be inspired by, perhaps you're being inspired by a different map, a picture of an island that you just think looks really cool, you can throw it on underneath as a layer and just on your own, in your own territory layer, just trace over. I'm actually going to put this layer right near the top for now, because I do want to supplant everything. So I'm just going to draw a little bit. I know roughly the size I want this to be. Do not like that color, right? We did talk about the color. Well, we didn't. I talked to the color about the color with the GM, and we're going for some sort of beige-like color. That'll do just fine. Great thing about a solid color like this is that we can always modify it. Your map may not need territory at all like this. That's too big. Your map might just your map might be fine just with loose star systems, and the territory is implied. It might be that the situation is that each star system exerts in a kind of a zone of control, but that the space in between the stars is all independent. Lots of options exist. You could also make a really, really, really thin brush and just do borders. You know, that actually doesn't look too bad just doing that. You know what? I'm going to clean this corner over here, but see, this is the eraser here. Of course, my opacity would be way off. Yeah, you know what? We can smooth that later, but for right now, we're going to fill that in, and then we're going to drop it to the bottom. And we're even going to put it below Starfield. And what we're going to do as well is reduce the opacity of the whole layer a little bit. Actually, that proved completely unnecessary. There was a different thing that I was doing with it that I cannot believe that I forgot it. I believe it has to do with, maybe it's darkening. Please bear with me, folks. Oh, that wasn't it. All right. Well, what you can do in some function or other is actually darken this entire layer so that it just looks like it's a bit further in the background. That didn't work. Let's just keep it at normal for now. I'm going to check back to the chat for a second. Nothing new here. Always feel free to throw questions in the chat. I'm going to be coming back in just a moment or two. I'm almost done with the main things I wanted to do. Something I opted to do for this map, you can see that I put the symbols of the different cultures. Got the Romulan Free State, Klingon Empire, Federation, Cardassians, Talarians. Some of these are beta canon. At least one I straight up took from a completely different faction and threw it in because I liked it better. Now, I actually have, the GM gave me the symbol he wanted for Anaxari space. I actually had it over here, hidden from you. I'm going to drag this layer into a completely different one, and let's see, did that work? Not how I intended it to work. Try a second time. Yes, obviously that's too big. Scale tool, scale it down. I also think it's a bit bright, so with the GM, I'm probably going to darken it. But that looks pretty cool, right? The provisional state of Greater Anaxar has its own symbol that's probably on their people's uniforms or on their flags. And perhaps we need a larger label for the whole territory. I'm of the view that it should be something which complements the color I chose here. So we're going to go with maybe a darker brown. Oops, not what I wanted here. We'll mess around with it. Let's say Visional State of Greater NXR. That's not exactly how I wanted it. I'm going to straighten this out. Going to make it smaller. Going to make it bold. This button here is bold. Bold. We're going to put an enter so that we have it in 2 lines. We're going to put it somewhere that is fairly empty. I'd like it to be above the star field. Yeah, you know what? Not bad at all. Don't like that color as much, though. I might change it. Might darken it slightly. That looks a bit better. That looks like it pops. The last thing in my notes that I wanted to show people what... Oh, there's 2 last things that I want to show, actually. First one is the easier one, then I'm going to do the harder one. I'm particularly fond of this fog of war that I made for this map. This is unexplored space. We have no idea what's over here. This is actually 2 separate layers, one of which is complete, one of which is partially erased, so that we can just slowly erase it and get more visibility. How do we make this? Well, we start with a new layer. Fog of War. Gonna be on the very top. And we're going to fill this. We go to Render, which is up here under Filters. Render. Sorry, lost my place here because I'm also trying to look at some paper notes I've made. Solid Noise, which is under Noise. Now you can see it's done this. I don't like this, but I can mess with the dials. Unlink them actually real quick. Ooh. Didn't like that. Let's cancel and try again. Sometimes it's a bit random. I'm going to try a second time. Noise, solid noise. Yeah. Detail. And you know what? That doesn't look half bad. Then we are going to do something else to it. Oh no, this is all I had for it. Anyway. We have some Gaussian, we have some fog of war here. Just looks like one might find on a video game. You're playing StarCraft, you've got an area of the map you've not gotten to yet. We're going to duplicate this layer. Oops, wrong button. Duplicate is over here. Going to invisible the duplicate, and we're going to start erasing a little bit. Actually, what I'm going to do is move some things around because I want to erase from Fog of War, the base one, everything that is in Anaxari territory. Because in this story, we have a fairly good understanding of Anaxari space. We just don't really know what's on the other side of it. In the lore that we've made as well, you can use a smaller brush size to make some of these lines a bit smoother. Yeah, we're going to just push that here. And this way. So, in the lore, this is on the far side of Romulan territory. If it were part of the same canon as this game is, which it is not, it would be around here. And scale-wise, it's probably a 2x3 grid like this, with about the density of you see in Cardassian space. That's kind of what the plan is. So you can see now, NXRE territory is explored, but everything on the far side of it is not. I'm going to move this territory back to the bottom. And one thing I'm going to do is for this fog of war, I'm going to... Will this work? No, it did not really work. Okay. I'd like to do something where the stars are actually visible through it. I think the way to do that is actually just putting Starfield on the very top. So now, oops, got one thing that I've accidentally done wrong here. This should be higher, shouldn't it? Where is this layer? Oh, because I didn't label it, that didn't help. Always label your name, your file or your layer names. Now this is showing us a nice amount of territory. We've got territory for the civilization. We have Federation and Romulan space in this direction. I might put a little bit of green, might put a little bit of blue. Figure this out later on. We're going to put a lot more labels and a lot more star systems. Did I not finish erasing? Silly me. Pro tip, by the way, always be absolutely certain you are on the correct label when doing something. More than once have I accidentally erased something that I shouldn't have. We might need to mess around with a few things, like erase certain stars, because we've put the star field on the very top. But that's okay. Everything is good we can refine as we go. Genium Boy says, yeah, the logo looks like a uniform pin rather than a flag symbol. I agree, actually. It does have that resemblance. Chalk it to this civilization being extremely new. I mean, it's a brand new government. They are on their way to becoming something different. They don't know their own symbolism quite yet. I might see if there's a way to get something that isn't quite this metallic, if there's a way to get it in like an earthy tone. Standard rule of flags is a child should be able to draw it. Perhaps a child can't draw this, but there's probably a way to simplify it in a way that looks quite good. The final thing I wanted to do, and this one is incredibly tedious. I don't necessarily recommend it, but one thing that I can recommend is if you ever want any of the assets I've produced, within reason, let me know. I might be able to send you something. I'm probably not going to send you this. I spent way too long on it. I'm very proud of it. I'm copyright Taral 1424 2023. I'm going to defend that a little bit. But, if you want pieces from it, absolutely. Anything like that. But nebulas, clouds, I've got a few in here. There's a few ways to do it. A simple way is if you can get a good, just kind of clip art nebula, something from NASA that you can have with a bit of transparency to it. That's a really good way to go. I did a different thing, and the one I did, I'm going to show you. I also have kind of a backup thing right here. Going to drag it in. This is, I'm going to actually hide everything else for a second. I'm going to label it. Nebula start. Hide the rest. This is a picture that I pulled off Google of smoke. That's all it is, smoke. Don't like that there's a bit of a corner here. So I'm going to maybe just do some light erasing so that it looks like it's meant to be. Yeah, it's fine. We're going to do a few things. We are going to mess with the levels a little bit. Not sure if we go to colors, levels. And if we turn this down, we get some bright areas that shine and some darker areas that fade into the background. We're going to do a paintbrush. We're going to fix a nice bright color, purple. Who doesn't love purple? And we are going to trace some lines at above it, though, in a new layer that's right above it. Nebula 2, or Nebula 1. At lower opacity. Do some tracing of some cool features that are in here. Got 10 minutes left. I'm probably not going to finish this whole process, but we're going to try a little bit. Get a nice big green. This might not work out. If it doesn't, we will do something different. And also, like I said, what I actually tend to do is take the nebula that I already made and just copy it and mess it around and maybe cut, maybe recolor. All right. So we've got a big old mess of colors here. We're going to take this color layer and we are going to go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to crank it up. Just a little bit. And then we are going to go into this one. We're going to find divide. Divide. That's actually not what I expected it to look like. But that does not look half bad. Now I'm going to do a couple quick things. I'm going to duplicate because I'm concerned that I will screw this up. I'm going to hide these hidden ones out of the way. We're going to merge these together. This button here is merge this layer with the one below it. This is now nebula. And we're going to Gaussian blur it. Blur. Gaussian blur. Crank it up a bit. You know, it doesn't look fantastic, but it pulls off that it's a cloud. It's got some colors. I'm going to copy the one from this map here and maybe bring it over to our maps, our new map, so you can see it. Stellar phenomena. Briar patch. That's a decent one here. Oh, that's the label. That's the one. Drag here. Let's make it visible. That's what the one I made looks like before. And I've rotated them. You know, here's right click on this and you select rotate. Look, now it's already a bit different. Colors, color balance. Turn down the cyan, turn up the magenta. Look, now it's different again. So these are a couple of tips that I have. What have we done today? Let's actually make everything visible again. So at the end we can see what we've done. We're going to shrink this layer down, actually. Scale. Oh, hang on. I forgot to do the all-important crop to content for this one. Yep. Going to scale it down. And we'll put that layer somewhere in the space. Put the fog of war, the full fog of war. Starbase. Activate all our layers. All right. Now, as I've just been playing around, I've just seen this problem with our nebula, that some of the transparency didn't quite work right. So we go back to a previous tip I've made, which is play around, laugh about with it. There's no wrong answer. You're being creative. You're doing art. Art for its own sake is fun. You're making maps. Maps are fun. Oops, did not actually mean to quite do that one. And I'm going to shrink this one down a bit again. Shrink. Going to put it just outside their territory. Ooh, see, look what we've just done. We've just made a big nebula cloud that has prevented the NXRE from growing their territory in this direction. We just story built, people, by deciding where we put our cloud. But together, we've made again, you're always going to find things you don't like as you're working. We've made the start of a map. We've put some territory on it. We've started populating that territory with stars. We've started labeling some of those stars. We've made a star base in orbit of one of them, and we've started adding some color to our territory. We know that this area is unexplored beyond it. We know there's a nebula. We know there's lots, and we will learn more as we go. How long does this process take? A long time. This has been my, I have some free moments before emails come in while working from home project for a number of weeks to months. This guy here, I think I started making in 2022, maybe 2021 even. Entirely self-taught with this and YouTube tutorials and just Googling questions sometimes. Let's do some last-minute questions before we go. Cloud looks like a wisp of smoke. It's what we were going for, right? That's why we even chose smoke as a starting point. Choose what you think looks good. When we do one of these, we do a lessons learned. What does everyone learn when they started to make their own maps? Maybe in some of our fleet channels, we can have kind of a best practices channel at some point. Oh, GDM Boy asks what art program I'm using. I am using GIMP. GIMP is a free, I call it for open source Photoshop, I guess. GNU image manipulation program, GIMP. Download it free. I'm actually using one that's slightly out of date. I keep forgetting to click the update because I want to do art when I start. I don't want to wait for the update. I don't know how to use the update. So, yeah, that's where we are. Last minute questions before we go. I see we only have 3 minutes left. I'm glad I used the entirety of our time. Yes, GIMP, correct. I just Googled be sure to put art tool or something. Paint.net is really good. Yep, I messed around with that. I wasn't as good with it. If you use like Adobe Illustrator tools, like if you pay for those, then I would argue those are better, but I'm not familiar with them. And because this is a hobby, I didn't want to pay. So something free and open source is what you want. Thank you everyone for attending my panel. Again, I'm Taral. I'm in the I'm elsewhere here. If you want to PM me with questions, comments, with wanting any art assets, let me know. Yes, that is the correct. I was trying to make that same point, Andy. Always refer to GNU GIMP or photo editing tools, something like that. You don't want to get an SFW results. Best wishes, everyone. I'll see you all around.